Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the weekly Secrets of Saturn live stream. I am Jason Lindgren, your host. A couple things I want to touch on before we get into the meat of the matter, which is going to be on Transposing the Mind, written by none other than our previous guest, Mark Bloom, who is joining us again. Also, of course, we have Wayne McCroy, Crow 777, and the great Baldini. Poof, he did a magic trick. So, let's address a couple things before we get going here. The weird YouTube thing. So I tried to deal with that today to make sure that the weird double link thing didn't happen, and indeed it didn't happen. I started a completely new session, didn't reuse anything. Everything looked great. Went into my YouTube studio, only showed the one that I put out everywhere. Lo and behold, after I actually kicked Restream on to begin the stream, it duplicated it again, not to my knowledge. So it's something outside of my control now, I know, but I don't know which one of these programs is duplicating it, whether it's YouTube itself being a little janky or if Restream's doing something weird. I don't know that yet because I wasn't expecting it to happen again. But anyway, at least I know that there's something going on that's not just my stupidity, which is nice to know. You know, you want to know these things. But anyway, I won't pontificate on that anymore. Anybody want to say any opening remarks before we get to that first article situation that you brought up, Baldini?
Nah, I'm good.
All right, so if everyone is on a computer, which I'm assuming you are, of some sort, go
Can you spell that for us?
TYPE. All right, so go to Google, then go to News. Under News, type in mass shootings surge. And look at what you get, because this is you want to see some serious poppycock. This is some serious poppycock.
And we have confirmation of this from people around the world, across the world. So it doesn't really matter where you're from. You'll get ultimately end up with all 50 states. This morning I had 15 identical results. This evening I got 7 right in a row, each of them pretending to be a local news outlet. For example, Tallahassee Democrat for Florida, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel for Wisconsin, Tennessean for Tennessee, Akron Beacon Journal for Ohio, Elwood City Ledger for Pennsylvania. They all claim, and they again pretending to be a local news outlet. The claim is mass shooting surge in insert state here as nation faces record high. Identical headline in each one, and pretty much an identical story in each one, each claiming 47% surge. I covered this, in fact, did this morning. This, for those who visited for a special edition of Cocky Pop, was this very specific topic. And so I just dropped that link in the chat if you want to go back and visit that. Just it wasn't a full episode. Just had to visit this real quick because pretty remarkable. And interestingly enough, it was I got hip to the tip from a completely blue pill normie friend of mine who approached me yesterday and said, "Hey, you're the conspiracy guy. What's up with this?" And I went, "Well, now you're starting to get it." He went, "What?"
So he should have said, "Now you know why they invented poppies and male chickens."
Right. Exactly. So pretty remarkable stuff. And if you had any question about whether you could trust anything that you read in the newspaper or the online quote news from quote authoritative news sources, think again. To quote Mark Twain, a.k.a. Samuel Clemens, if you read the newspaper, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do, you are misinformed. There you go.
But Baldini, why would they lie?
Why? But why would they lie? Well, yeah. 7.5 billion reasons, according to them. Yeah. Just like the insert number here, new cases. That was had appeared for a while. If you would type in any 3-digit number and new cases, you would get a local news report somewhere claiming that many new COVID cases in their location. So it's again pretty remarkable. In fact, you can still do it right now. I'd put in 1, 2, 3 new cases, and I get 7 in a row. New cases reported in Cy-Fair ISD, deaths in Monroe County, new cases in Monroe County, new cases in past week in Naperville, new cases in Vermont. So you can still play the same game if you like. I can put in like 345 new cases. India reports 345 new cases, 345 new cases of COVID-19. 1 patient dies. UK reports 345 deaths. So yeah, you can put in whatever number you want, and you'll get a return for that. It's poppycock. It is, Gregory May, a fun little game, as long as you're on this side of the wall. It would be very frustrating if you were trying to defend your position, as everything is just as they tell you. I
think somebody better quote Clooney here.
Go ahead.
spot, fellas.
We're in a tight spot.
Isn't this a geographical oddity? Everything's 2 weeks away.
Oh, here I thought you were going to say,
Exactly.
well, I'm going to accept this award on behalf of everyone.
Oh, yeah, no, I was going to. Yeah, it's a geographical oddity. That 2 weeks turned into a year, didn't it? 2 weeks to flatten that curve turned into a year this week.
Well, I don't know if we flattened it yet.
Oh, dear. All right.
I don't want fop. God damn it! I'm a
Yeah,
Dapper
right.
Dan man.
I'm a Dapper Dan, man.
Get to
to the right pomade there, my friend. He's bona fide. You want to introduce our guest, our returning guest this week, Jason?
Yep. So, as I said at the beginning here, we have Mark Bloom coming back with us. Mark, what do you want to tell everybody? That we brought you back on because the first one you did with us went over really, really well. I kind of knew that was going to happen, I should say, because people really dig music in general as a topic because pretty much everyone is into music in some way, shape, or form, right? Like it touches them and it means something to them. Even if it was when they were younger, it's still just about everyone. It's a significant thing too. But what do you want to tell everybody to key this up?
This one is a little bit different. It does involve music, but in a kind of the idea basically came from I watched an interview. Beth Martins interviewed Jerry Marzinski about he worked in with schizophrenic people and people with psychosis, and like someone in my family from before my time, before I was born, had schizophrenia, and I've heard the stories about it over many years. So there's something in that interview kind of sparked an idea, because Jerry Marzinski was implying that the medical industry doesn't understand what causes schizophrenia or psychosis, and that what they do know is that it's not intrinsic to the person who's suffering from it, it's external to them. So the chemicals that they're giving people, he's alleging, is just to numb the effect, to like dull the signal, essentially. And he's explaining it in a way that it's almost like interference from outside. And through his own observations and working with people and his own experiences, his own personal experiences with this, he was explaining that it's like an outside source. And I actually had a conversation in that live chat at the time with Sue Finelli about the idea of thoughts and ideas being planted in people's heads, because some people in a live chat were talking about how they felt that they had like thoughts and ideas planted in their own heads that weren't theirs. It was almost from an external source. And I found this fascinating. So because I have lucid dreams, I think I mentioned last time, and I'd been sort of doing what Baldini does a lot with sort of pontificating what the nature of that could be and how that might function. So coincidentally, or perhaps not coincidentally, that night I went to sleep. I had a lucid dream. I woke up from it, and my brain was sort of sifting through, or my mind was sifting through all this information as soon as I woke up, and this was early hours of the morning. And then I sort of organized the information in my head, and then I went back to sleep, woke up the next day. It was all still there, so I decided I'm going to write all of this down, type it up. I sent it through to Red Fox and Baldini, and the both of them read it and wanted to present it, and Red Fox went live first, and then afterwards the both of them went live together on Red Fox's channel, and now that channel doesn't exist. So at the time, Red Fox had a small audience, but the people who were there, it seemed to resonate with them. So I thought now, because it's been almost been a year. It was not too long after we went into lockdown that this happened. This was basically how I introduced myself to Baldini, was through this document. And then because it doesn't exist anymore, that the original uploads, I thought it might be worth offering it to you, Baldini, again on your channel, just to see how it goes over with your audience.
I think they'll like it. The premise is certainly fascinating and applies to a wide variety of aspects as we look at the world around us. Of course, initially the document being called Transposition looks at it from a musical aspect, but there is so much more to that. And so again, Red and I both found it fascinating, and I invited Mark to be on it. It was his first time being on any channel, I think, at the time, and then. Red contacted me, and I had Red on my channel, and he said, "Is it okay if I put it up first?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you get it out there." So he did, and did a great job, kind of doing a dramatic reading of it. But Red has kind of gone underground for a while, and
he's hibernating.
Yeah, exactly. He's in hibernation season right now. So, in any case, so we thought, it'd be great to have Mark present these ideas and then kind of expound on how it can apply in a multifaceted way as we begin, to touch back again to these ideas of, frequency, vibration, harmonic resonance, even morphic resonance, if you want to get that far, into these ideas as it goes from simply waves and wave propagation into organic life and materials, and how it could affect and have an influence on that. So I guess with that, just hand it back to you, Mark.
Oh, I should say, I don't know if I did say this a moment ago, but I'll say in advance, just so people don't, flip out or anything. It's this is a thought experiment. This was before I was fully introduced to what's going on here with people truth seeking and all this business. This was my sort of first run at it, so it wasn't intended as a proper study. I don't have reference material, or apart from I mentioned Jerry Marzinski, and I think in the document itself I do sort of refer to a book called 30 Years Among the Dead, but that's just a loose reference. But it's basically a thought experiment in which I tried to frame the functions of how thought might work when considering what Jerry Marzinski said about some sources of thought can come from external to us, or be planted, and then the idea of dreams plays into it, where most people are probably familiar, or everyone really, with dreams. Sometimes it might seem that there's something in that dream, or an individual who seems to be behaving autonomously. So I thought it kind of links in with that idea, with what Jerry Marzinski was saying. So I tried to frame that in a way I could understand. And because I'm a musician, I'm not excellent at music theory, but one thing I did remember was transposition. And when I thought about the concept of transposition, I thought that kind of fits this concept of thought. So I decided to write this out in that framework.
And
all right.
So Jason, do you want to read this as you typically do? Because you're the guy.
Yep,
all right.
absolutely. Yeah. Let me put on my voiceover voice.
There you go, and we can stop and hit the salient points when those occur.
In musical terms, transportation, let's try that all over again. Transportation, train spotting.
Your professionalism on display.
In musical terms, transposition is the raising or lowering of precomposed musical notes by a tone or tones, key or keys, often to accommodate to the range of a particular instrument, as some instruments can play only in a certain key, such as C major, D major, E major, etc., or someone's register, such as soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. I personally am a tenor too. The intervals, number of tones or semitones, between each note of the composition remain the same, but the overall music is either higher or lower in pitch, depending on whether it was raised or lowered in tone or key from its original state. And this is something that's incredibly common, by the way. If you ever go see a lot of these guys who do, say, like piano music where they're playing by themselves and they're singing different songs, they're constantly just like, it sounds like Let It Be, but something sounds a little weird. That's because they just bopped it to a different key, or they transposed it to a different key just so it's in their vocal range and they're not straining at all.
Sure, and we
Bon Jovi do it.
a bit. In fact, last time Mark was here, right, about the intervals being the same, and you can just throw out a chord progression like 1 6 2 5, and then those relationships and ratios stay the same to each other, regardless of what the tonic is, right? Whatever the root note is, those relationships will remain the same to each other. You just start out at a different place. So that's the premise of transposition: is that everything, the relationships to one another remain the same, regardless of where you start.
All right. Anybody else got a commentary there? That's just kind of the intro, really. What if transposition is not limited to music, but also applies to the corporeal and incorporeal? Could thoughts be notes from higher or lower registers acquired through transposition into the key of which our instrument, the mind, plays, which then draws out these thoughts into ideas and then further uses them to create within our register of existence the material world? And I'm all about that concept because I say it all the time. The universe is frequency.
Yeah. And then bingo, you have right there, just like contained right in that, higher minded and lower minded, right, thoughts and ideas. That you would have the higher minded, a higher frequency, and then the lower minded, lower frequency, for example, fear, right, where they keep everybody in a low state of fear. So right there in that second paragraph, it sort of encapsulates the entire premise.
Absolutely, and that would tie into the thought that consciousness is a type of frequency per se, and that we, being the human being, our mind is kind of the tuner. So we actually are like a radio set, whereas we're tuning in this certain what would we say, consciousness, this level of consciousness, this frequency per se, and this is actually reflected in this different type of idea here, where you're talking, there's different range of consciousness, like you're talking like higher mindedness to lower minded type thought patterns and this kind of thing, where people who are heavily transfixed with the hypermaterial would be kind of trapped in this lower key. You know what I'm saying? Whereas if your consciousness, if you're kind of thinking on that higher level consciousness, you're tuned into more spiritual things, more aware of things beyond just the material world. And as such, you have more of an effect on the exterior material world through the power of thought. I mean, this is a fascinating idea, and it's a really good thought experiment to look at, because I do think some of this really holds true.
And it's again, I think beautifully constructed. Like I said, it's a great idea, and especially if you even push that metaphor a little bit further. And again, we just barely started with this document, but if you press that metaphor a little bit further and consider the relationship between the available notes or semitones that a person has available in their, let's say, in their consciousness. So it could be a minor key, sad, so they're depressed, or they're always kind of get that negative vibe going on, or cacophony, right? Or let's say, for example, you've got a pentatonic minor, right? Fewer notes from which to choose. You can still communicate, but not nearly as complex as you would, say, with 18-note semitones, right? So something larger and more harmonic and less dissonant, right? So these are fascinating ideas to consider when you apply them, and if you will, transpose them over the idea of consciousness and thought.
So what about a concept such as, to give everyone a fictional example, something like They Live, where they were broadcasting a frequency and pulling the humans away from what was actually there. They're bopping them into a different sort of frequency, I guess you could say, from that broadcasting transmitter thingy they had at the end that they blew up. I think that's a good example of that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And
I would agree.
And you could even push again the metaphor, the idea that you could, using additive synthesis, right, modulate one of those frequencies without the listener or the receiver really knowing that the information has been changed through some other additive synthesis process, that some other waveform have been introduced to it. It modifies the waveform. They still receive it in a similar way, but it has an internal effect that is different. So again, these ideas are fascinating, and I'm delighted that Mark's here to present them.
We've got one that can see.
C sharp.
The bedrock for this idea would have to be the muses, wouldn't it? Going way back.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you look back in the mythology, yeah, the muses for sure.
Come this
that
way,
could
sailor boy.
relate to this.
Have a cup of coffee.
Yeah. And certainly Pythagorean theory and the idea that, again, most of Western music is based on these ideas of ratios to one another, right? 4-3 and 3-9 and 4-5, these ratios create the intervals that we're familiar with in Western music. And so, again, a mathematic in construct, but certainly, as Crow said, bringing in the muses and the inspiration, absolutely.
Well, there's also the term broadcast used a moment ago originally came from farming for broadcasting seeds. So planting seeds was you would broadcast them so you could cover a larger amount of ground in a shorter time to take the most amount of vegetable food or whatever it is you're growing. You plant, you choose your seed and you broadcast them. So this is where radio took that term from, because it was broadcasting the frequencies far and wide like you would seeds. And then if you think about the analogy between planting seeds and planting thoughts, or in this case frequencies for radio, thoughts for, I don't know, evil people who rule the world.
And if you again introduce the idea of the sky clock and the influence that each astrological sign has, you might even then consider that each of the sun signs have kind of a different tonic or root chord, and so then harmonize or resonate differently as each of these astrological signs comes through their house, right? As we experience it, each is going to be somewhat differently resonate with those influences differently. But if those are truly electromagnetic, as I suspect that they are, then again, you would have a very interesting case of every living thing creating sort of a symphony, right?
Would you believe I have a thought experiment on exactly that? Called the Luminary Orchestra.
Well, it's provable because they've assigned color to each of the zodiacal boundaries. So what you said is provably true.
Yeah, and then music, they did the same thing. The original, before we had the staff that we have now in Western music, they used color to signify which key and which chords you were playing, and they assigned them color wheels. In fact, you can Google and still find some evidence of that. It's not nearly as clear as it once was. They do kind of obfuscate it.
Yeah, they still do it. This is something I was taught at university as well. We had a guest lecturer from India who flew over, or a few of them did, but one guy in particular taught me, and he was teaching us about he was basically teaching us color and vibration in a different terminology. So he was talking about color and music in relation to the different keys and modes and the different scales, because the scales in India are different. Like they'll have like notes between tones and semitones, and so they have different scales where it'll be for different times of day as well as different colors. So there'd be the one I remember was called Kalyani, which is a upbeat, happy one. So if you were writing this in sheet music, you'd be using quavers or semi-quavers, something rapid and upbeat and very melodic, and that would be for that particular key, Kalyani, which is basically the C major key with a raised F. So F sharp is Kalyani. It's the easiest one I can remember. And there was also correlation between color with it. So that's essentially color and vibration. It still goes on.
I think it's pretty demonstrable that all these things interrelate when it comes down to it. Music and thought, I think, are very intrinsically tied together, as well as the different colors and the different frequencies, this kind of thing that goes with it. Because if you look at the word music, well, that's derived from the word muse. So that right there kind of infers that there's a thought process involved in there. So this would be, the creation of thought, the creation of music. They kind of go hand in hand in many different ways. So when you look at it from that point of view, and then you could attribute different colors and just very many different themes to the different musical chords and the different frequencies, this kind of thing, you can see where all these things are intrinsically tied together. So I think there might really be something to this idea of linking, say, music or frequency to thought and thought processes. And as Baldini had implied, you could tweak those frequencies in a way, modulate them just in such a way where the observer doesn't notice them consciously, but it will affect the unconscious in a way like that.
And keeping in mind that music is the only one of our senses that we receive that goes directly to the music center. There's a music center in the brain. It bypasses the limbic system. And it's the only one of our senses, the cardinal senses, that does that. Everything else will go through the limbic system first. And music will go straight to the music center first. So you could embed all kinds of stuff. It's very, very powerful.
Well, the definition that we have and the word we have to talk about it, by virtue of what they mean, basically are implying external inspiration, right? Muse, music, those two are derived, and the whole idea is that there's some, put it this way. Is that what happened to Jimmy Page? They cut him off from the muses?
Well, co-creation as well.
I guess that's a nice way to put it.
Both Baldini and Wayne are familiar, aren't they, with co-creation and the idea of the creator, and we can co-create with the creator. That, if for anyone who's spiritual or religious, I suppose that concept comes into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fundamental tonic has been set, and then if you get in resonance with that, then you're set to co-create.
Right, and if you don't, then you're cut off from the muses. that's a nice way to put it.
Turn the page, right? So, Bob Seger.
Here I am.
So they've actually got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's 7 of them, of course. There's 7 muses. 1 for flutes and poetry, comedy and pastoral poetry, tragedy, dance, love and poetry, sacred poetry, and Urania, of course, is astronomy.
And 7 primary tones in Western music.
There it is. 7 colors.
Which one do I got to bang to be a really good guitar player?
You're probably not going to be one of getting it on with Euterpe because she does flutes.
Oh, flute.
Yeah, I'm not into any kind of flutes.
And someone's going to make a meat whistle joke and tune it to the key of F.
Oh my.
Mercy.
That's going to B flat. Oh, sorry.
Areto is love. Oh, here it is. Polyhymnia is sacred poetry. Melpomene is tragedy. Derpsiskor is dance.
Derpy deleter.
Derp.
I'm just saying, it's all implied. There's 7 colors primarily in the rainbow. There's 7 luminaries, so it's all like 7 shots.
All I have to say is the muse of derp must be hard at work in the world today.
So we get to 7.
They hang out with Nickelback.
And the interesting thing about the 7 days in the week is it's the only one of the timekeeping measures that is specific to mankind. We're the only one that recognizes a week, that 7-day cycle, and they have tried a few different times, including in France following the revolution, to make a 10-day week, a metric week. They've tried a variety of things, and people just don't adjust well to it. So the original story of creation, as we're given in numerous ancient mythos of creation mythos, of there being 7 days, is fascinating, right? That's again, that number appears, that 7 is the number of completion, but man is the only one who relates to it in that way. So it's fascinating.
Well, it's interesting too because dia and day are the same in certain Latin languages.
Yep. Yeah.
So the deity idea, the deity idea is there.
Sorry.
I would suggest that the muse thing, now that I'm looking over it again, is implying the sky clock is uttering those influences. I'd have to look at it more closely, but the last one is astronomy. But as you go through, it seems like it's all matched up in the same way everything else is.
All right.
And I was just, sorry, Jason. I was just going to say to add to what Crow was saying. Then in Gaelic, Dia is God. D-I-A, pronounced dear, and a bit like deity, but it's also how you greet someone. I think I said last time, Diaret. So Diaret means God with you, but it's basically their way of saying hello, and the response to that is Dia is Murerit, which means God and Mary to you.
And Biocandias, go with God, right? Even goodbye in English is a shortening of God be with ye. So, it's all kind of embedded.
I don't know.
All right, here we go. In music.
I got a break for a second, Jason. I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Okay. In music, the notes pre-exist, and the composer utilizes his or her musical knowledge and ability to choose desired notes in a desired order at a desired time. I would also add at a desired velocity, thus creating a piece of music with harmony, melody, and rhythm, something coherent and resonant. Applied to thought, this could interpret that thoughts pre-exist, and the thinker utilizes his or her contemplative knowledge and ability to focus the mind on particular thought, develop it into an idea, and then further develop the idea into creation. This act, in and of itself, would be considered transposition. If the thinker successfully translates thoughts from their incorporeal register of origin to his or her corporeal register, meaning the non-physical or non-tangible to the physical or tangible, right? Then a transposition has occurred. Moreover, if the mind is the instrument, is it one of a limited and fixed register, like the tenor horn, or one of versatility, like the voice? It could easily be suggested that the mind is more akin to the voice, both being natural and internal to thinker and singer, as opposed to an instrument like the tenor horn, which is external to the musician. Interestingly, the voice can also transpose a piece of music from a limited or fixed key or register into any other key or register, granted a skilled enough vocalist is available. Could, then, the mind have the same capability if a skilled enough thinker were available? With enough skilled vocalists, the level of musical coherence and resonance achievable is extreme, as can be heard from large ensemble choirs. So could an extreme level of conscious coherence and resonance be achieved with enough skilled thinkers. I completely and utterly think that's true because we've heard of mass consciousness experiments, especially with those who are dedicated thinkers, like people who are monks that meditate and can really focus, or maybe defocus is a better way of saying that.
Yeah, and not just on the same thought, but consider the idea of choir where you take parts, right, and do harmony. What if you were to kind of press that idea a bit and get interrelated thoughts such that they harmonized, and again, the sum is greater, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Right, and that speaks to the fractal nature of what we are. We're all a tiny fractal of what we would consider to be God. So, like, if you look at it from those terms, we're a small fractal of this greater, what would we call it, mosaic, or something similar to that. So, with that being the case, you could see how, if we all work together in tandem, it would create this wonderful coherence or resonance, just like it says here. It's the same kind of idea. And also, if you look at some of these different concepts presented here in this last paragraph, you're looking at what kind of correlates back to more Pythagorean type thought, whereas there's an archetypal world where thoughts are born and then they become manifest by stepping down through these different levels. So you could see how this is kind of like the interval system of music, and these ideas kind of resonate. So it's really something, I think, that really there's something there. And just as a casual aside, people always request that I sing 10 or 11 miles from where they're at.
Away.
So,
mercy.
I could do solo. Solo, you can't hear me. That's the way it's. But yeah, this idea, again, pressing the metaphor even further. If everybody was to be the person that they were meant to be, then each could be like plucking a single string on, let's say, a harp, and then the whole thing, if played together, would be again musical and resonant. And it does seem as though those who run the place prefer this cacophonous, as low as possible frequency.
Discordant.
So, yeah, exactly, discord. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they want everybody to sound like Nickelback.
Yeah. I mean, look at the stuff they push.
Jason opened the door. I couldn't resist.
And if not Nickelback, Creed. I mean, come on. Like, how much more scraping the bottom of the barrel do we need to go here?
Well, I was thinking, what is it? The My Pal Foot.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's pretty hard.
So why don't we expand this out a little bit and talk about what a lot of the crap that gets tied in with what the bad guys do, and that's they do try to tap into this concept of a mass consciousness by doing their bullshit retarded rituals on stages, like Pink a few years back doing a full Masonic ritual on stage, and like, all this stuff for whatever it is they're trying to bring into being. I mean, this is a form of sympathetic magic, I think is the correct term for it. Correct me if I'm wrong. What's her name? Beyonce. She did one a couple years ago where it was all about police states, and she had people marching in uniform for the New World Order and all that stuff, because it's all just art. And what about the two dipshits at the awards a couple years ago going shot, 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 shot right before all this nonsense hit? What do you think, guys?
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's almost like that idea of when people have taken photographs of the television, like you guys were setting up over, I can't remember what the date was it around the 21st of December, that sort of time, to take pictures of the television screens because of the flicker rate. Some images are filtered through, and there was a woman who accidentally caught kill came up on the screen. She just happened to catch it somehow, and it's a little bit like that, but instead of visual, auditory.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we've demonstrated that a number of times in high tech music industry stuff, and putting together different pieces of equipment and using additive synthesis again to broaden bandwidth of pieces of gear. For example, human hearing is generally considered to go between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. So that's why, for example, they have your CD sample rate is set to 44.1 based on the Nyquist theorem, which says that if you can sample any frequency, you have to do it at twice the sampling rate so that you can get it to effectively show up with any kind of quality. And so they gave 44 for 22,000 hertz, and then 0.1 is for error correction. But the idea is then many manufacturers just started making lower bandwidth equipment that would only go up to that, like 20,000 hertz. But when you have equipment that will do, let's say, up to 150,000 hertz, it always sounds better. And so there was an inquiry as to why, because you can't hear that. Clearly, you can't.
You do get a lot of dingleberries that argue that, but I'm with you, Baldini.
Well, it's actually proven, because what happens is that those higher frequencies do modulate those lower frequencies.
It makes harmonics. Absolutely.
Exactly. It makes harmonics. And so you perceive that as being fuller, richer, thicker sounding, even though you can't hear the tonic frequency or the fundamental of it. You can certainly, it does modify the others. And so in waveform, transmission and propagation, we absolutely know that there's additive and subtractive, constructive and deconstructive interference. And so when you begin to add those things together and they harmonize at certain resonance frequencies, it's absolutely going to modulate it. And it's that modulation that we perceive as being broader bandwidth. And so, yeah, it's certainly true that broader bandwidth equipment, it's much more expensive because it requires a lot better component level technology to do it. And so it's generally a lot more expensive. And again, as you say, some dingleberries go, you can't hear it anyway. Why would I spend all that money? Well, it's because you end up with a much better quality ultimately. But then again, once you get it recorded, people are downsampling to MP3s, right, and listening through 99-cent earbuds. So, you have a $5,000 mic going into a $10,000 preamp, into a $5,000 compressor, to a $50,000 console, and somebody's listening to it. They downloaded it for free and playing it back with a 99-cent codec, right? So it's a little bit disappointing when you put a bunch of effort into it and it comes out bad.
But thankfully, there's the opposite side where somebody spends $10,000 on a headphone amp.
Oh, right, exactly. There is that.
It balances out.
Or $50 a foot for a directional cable. Right? So, but and they swear they can, hear a difference, and it's confirmation bias, really. But ultimately, it kind of gets down to this idea where, and you and I have discussed this at length on numerous occasions, that it does seem intentional, the degradation of both the quality of music and the quality of audio. So that, again, it all contributes to this lower-minded behavior. What you perceive it to be of quality is of such a lower level now than it once was, that it would be, I think, considered to people just going back even a few generations, they would consider some of what is considered now good music to be laughable. And certainly if you went all the way back to Bach and Mozart and those guys, they would go, what? What are you doing? What is this garbage? Yeah, anyway.
Oh, speaking of all that, I've been meaning to say this for weeks. If anybody, I can't afford to really splurge on one, but if anybody has an older reel-to-reel player it's literally just being used as a doorstop and it works, and they want to donate it over this way, I would love to do some tests on analog versus digital, and a higher quality analog device like a reel-to-reel is about as good as you're going to get in this day and age, because that stuff's just not really made anymore. But I definitely would like to try that out and report on my findings.
I can tell you that one album that I worked on a number of years ago was when the Otari radar was actually still with IZ Technology, and it got sent to a studio that I was working at at the same time that they had bought an Otari 8. Well, it was a
that's Otari with an O, not Atari like.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Good distinction there.
Yeah,
I'm
it is
glad,
a very
because I had
different.
an Atari 800 XL computer as a kid with
You and
built-in
me
bass.
both, buddy.
And
Remember
that was-
those?
that was it back then, man.
Yeah, so he had just acquired a Studer A800 and had a few channels that were bad in the preamp section, and some of the tracking heads were damaged, and so we were looking for replacement. And we found a guy in England who was making 16-track and 8-track head stacks for 2-inch tape, and that's a 1/4 inch per track. And so I did an experiment for this record, and it turned out fabulous. It was take a stripe of SMPTE, which is a time code locking mechanism, and put it on one track of the analog tape, and then left a space, and then one track, and then had 6 tracks that were a 1/4 inch wide. I get that thing at like plus 34, just burn that stuff, and then bounce it over to the radar, which is a digital recording media, and then blank those tracks and come back and record it again. And ultimately, it sounded amazing because you got tape saturation really, really good. It sounded like it was coming off a 10-inch piece of tape. It was amazing. I would love to do that again if I could find the right kind of gear. So yeah, to your question, Jason, it absolutely does work. And you can get that. In fact, guys to this day will still, when they master stuff, pop to a half track, which is a half-inch stereo track deck, and do that because you can get tape saturation, and it works. It works better than a plug-in.
I've heard some A/B comparisons, and I can definitely hear a difference. And that's one of the things I want to do. But a decent one, I'm looking at minimal $500, $600. I just don't have that to burn on a recorder I wouldn't use very much. So, but like I said, if anybody's got one, even an older one that's not necessarily like the best of the best, I'd still love to play around with it just to do some experiments with.
And
but that's beside the point.
If you want some stuff mastered, I know a guy in Nashville who, a buddy of mine, and he's got a half track that he can bump your stuff to. And
oh, cool. Very cool.
So yeah, we'll talk offline. But yeah, it can be done.
Awesome.
It's a thing. All right, let's get back to this.
To get back on track.
Staying up till all the wee hours there in Liverpool.
By the way, because of that conversation, just let me say that I've actually asked Baldini if he wanted to do an actual music gear related podcast, because you just heard what he and I did when everyone else is probably sitting around going, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
And for all the non-music related people out there, one of the quickest ways to, broaden your bandwidth is when the band actually eats too much fast food while they're on the road. So just so you know that.
Oh, that was rough, dude. I like it.
You could use that one, Baldini. I know you're always looking for new terrible jokes to pass along. So.
Not really. They just land on me from time to time. But.
Well, this one is landed.
Exactly.
Nosedived, actually.
Right. So. Are we at the pineal gland yet?
Well, here's let me throw something out here before we do move on here. What do we think of the concept of what the elitist scumfucks do with these rituals? Because I've been thinking about this while we've been chit-chatting. Like, can you imagine like what kind of power and things that they might actually be able to manifest with all their negative nonsense with symbolism and all that, with the power of a celebrity figure like a Beyonce or that disgusting Pink or any of those other people? What do you think that they might be able to do? Like, this is exactly, I think, what Mark was getting at here. How much power do you think they could really rustle up here, and what do you think might actually be possible? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think most cases it could be the wall. You know, the Pink Floyd idea of the wall, a mental wall, not like a physical thing, but like if there's something they don't want you to know, then you're not going to know. Like you could construct a mental, like a frequency wall, I guess, is probably the easiest way of putting it. for most people. So censorship, I guess, mental censorship.
Yeah, self-censorship, which is, you can see it happen when people almost get it and their eyes flicker and then they go into zombie mode, and you can watch it happen. But
and
yeah,
also
absolutely.
the heritage, I suppose, putting up a wall between heritage, because if you think about, say, Aboriginal or Indigenous tribes are probably the most difficult for the Western civilization, commerce, all that nonsense, to really penetrate and take over, because they have a oral tradition, but we now know that through say certain plants like ayahuasca or whatever, that sort of stuff, there's a link to frequency there and passing on of knowledge from nature itself and from ancestors. I don't know how anyone would go about proving that other than first-hand experience, but if there's something to it, then that would be, I guess, an avenue of thought where there's another wall placed on us where we don't really know our own history, because, like Crow says, that history is a lie agreed upon. And so because we don't have access to that, it's almost like there's a wall, but the wall is like a void. Just we don't have access to our own cultural heritage, which I found looking into my own heritage, which should have been easier considering I have red hair. I looked into my heritage and started finding out all sorts of new information, because I come from quite a poor background. We don't have like a long trail, but I've started finding much more, tracing names back really far. And as soon as I started doing that was when I started writing these thought experiments and having almost like more access to ideas and thought and like avenues to take that would lead to more information. And I feel like that maybe it's like a way of scattering our mind, so we can't access information that would actually help us stay on track.
My point of view on that whole thing with these types of rituals they do, something like these Super Bowl halftime shows and all of this stuff, in my view, this is actually vampirizing the minds of the observers and drawing all that energy to this central point. And, the dark occultists that are controlling that ritual are redirecting that energy in whichever way they see fit. Now, whether this is, putting up walls, mental barriers for the public to manifest and to kind of be blinded to or go into that zombie type mode, or whether it's some other activity that they're planning on trying to push in the future, like, say maybe like a planned illness of some sort or something like that. They'll redirect this energy that way. They'll draw this energy from the observer, because when you have that many eyes on a ritualistic ceremony like this is a type of a dark magical force. It draws from those people's consciousness, whether they realize it or not. So I think this is more, rather than putting out, say, a thought to the public at large, it's more drawing their thoughts towards this central point and directing their energies to this central point for redistribution, however the person manifesting this ritual sees fit. That's more my view of it. It's kind of like a vampirizing of the mind of people. It's utilizing their minds and their collective thought energy to manifest in the way that the quote unquote caster of this spell or ritual, whatever it may be, whatever it is that they're looking to accomplish with it. So I think that's kind of more of how that works in my view. Now, I could see your point, as it does kind of put up as a side function. It blocks people's minds to these different ideas and these different things because it vampirizes them. I'm sorry, what was it?
Multi-purpose, it could be.
Yeah. All of this stuff. And all of this stuff is dual use. All of it's dual use.
Multifaceted. And I consider, too, the idea that, again, one of the documents that Mark sent to me was that somebody had done a study and aligned different tones, tonics from like C, C sharp, D, to each of and there are 12 of those, right, semitones there in Western music, and again, aligned those to each of the different astrological signs in the sky clock, that those would be healing frequencies. And interestingly enough, what I was looking at his list, and the one that most closely aligned to my birthday, my sun's sign, was actually just a half step off. And I thought, well, if you adjust for the actual date and 432 tuning versus 440, it would be interesting because it would put me in the key of G, which is the one I always kind of tend to go to. So it's very, very interesting in that regard. But to the idea of what could they do with the power? Well, consider then if these ideas are true and that we're kind of tuned in to different frequencies, individually as well as in by group, for example, by sun sign and astrological house, it does seem as one of the things that they've accomplished certainly is to polarize people and to make enemies out of different people because of differences. And it certainly seems that rather than use what seems to be the intent to make us harmonized together and to show the variations, as Wayne said, that we're holographic images of the Creator himself, that we were supposed to be kind of interconnected and interdependent. Instead, they've turned us against one another and made enemies out of one another. And as I said earlier, kind of making dissonance and cacophony out of what should have been harmonic beauty. And it seems that is one of the things that they have accomplished at this point, is to make enemies out of anybody who doesn't agree with you or align with you, and forcing people into kind of a cult thing that they either accept the party line or they're outcast, or now we're even considered as domestic terrorists. That's the new move, right? So it does seem that there is validity to these ideas.
Crow, you got anything you want to put in on that? We talk about music all the time, even off the air.
No, I think I'm going to look a little more into the muse idea, though. I hadn't, before you guys started reading this, I hadn't really thought of it in this way, but it appears to line up with just about everything else coming through the sun, which will always be 7. The idea of the perfect number that sums occultly to 10, so it's a perfection idea and all that, too.
Cool. All right, let's move on in the document then. A side note. Could the pineal gland be some form of send and receive antenna, the tone of the individual's mind, a tone meant, or one mind, the collective mind, at one meant? Well, yeah, I'm all about that again. That, again, reminds me of the concept of a bunch of monks sitting together and focusing on peace, world peace in an area, and I know there have been experiments done like that. But anybody want to comment on that before we move on?
Well, keep in mind the idea of conspire, right? To be conspiracy, conspire is to breathe together, literally. So.
Yeah, I would add to that this kind of lines up with an old occultic thought that everybody's basic consciousness is first and foremost implanted in them by what they would call a quote-unquote seed atom. Okay, that's atom, A-T-O-M, seed atom. And this seed atom also has along with it the idea of a keynote. And everybody's consciousness has this keynote. So this is kind of the same type of thing. And it's being related here to the pineal gland. I don't know. I think in the older texts and stuff, they equate this more to the heart chakra. Or that kind of thing, not so much to the pineal gland or like the chakra, the throat chakra, the head chakra, but it's the same basic idea when it comes down to it. We all have this specific keynote that is individual to each of us, and this is contained within that seed atom, which is the seed of spirit. When man becomes manifest in physical reality, he's given this seed atom, and this is basically what consciousness is tied to. So it's this keynote idea.
And I don't think that can be separated from the idea of morphic resonance.
Right. Absolutely, it does tie right up with right in hand with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to say what Baldini said a moment ago about the 12 months and then the 12 tones. And he said his correlated. This was because I was looking into the keynote that you just mentioned, Wayne, and because I contacted Mandara from I can't remember the name of the website now. Do you remember, Jason?
Crow, what was Mandara Cromwell's website? Do you know? I don't recall what it was.
I can't recall.
Cyma Technologies.
There it is.
Cyma Technologies.
I think it's Cymatech. Here, I'll look it up.
maybe comp.
But yeah, she's been
Either
a guest
way.
with us twice. Very interesting work, tons of cymatic work. But go ahead, Mark.
I emailed her for the to see if I could get the code to be able to watch the documentary, and I watched that, and I thought it was brilliant. And that night I went to sleep, and when I woke up the next day, I had a couple of notes playing in my ears. In one ear I had D, and in the other ear I had D sharp. Like I kept hold of them so I could get to a keyboard.
put the beat, man, that harmonic beat into your head. That'd be awesome.
And then I went to my laptop and just put it on and got an online keyboard up just so I could match the notes to make sure I had it right. And it reminded me of when I was in college, because this relates somewhat to the keynote idea and the 12 months and 12 tones, because I remembered when I was in college, my first week of college, I had a lecturer called Andy. I think it was Andy Duffy. I was speaking to him at the beginning of class. Everyone was there, everyone was talking. I was speaking to him, and then mid-conversation, he just hit a couple of keys on the keyboard, and the class looked, and he said, "That's your natural key, the natural key of your voice when you speak." And then 2 notes he hit was D and D sharp. And having watched this documentary and woke up the next day with those notes in my ears, it reminded me of that. This was back in 2014 when my lecturer, my tutor, hit the 2 keys. But this documentary and the following day with the notes playing in my ears, it brought back that memory. And then so I decided to email Mandara to be like, how weird is this kind of thing? And then a couple of weeks later, I got in contact with, I just happened to buy some 432 hertz music from a guy called Mike Puskus from Australia. And he just out of the blue emailed me because he thought I'd been ripped off by Bandcamp, which I had to put a tax on it. And so he offered me in the future to do a better deal privately over PayPal, and we've become friends now. So he was the one who told me and sent me the information about the 12 months correlating with these 12 tones. And what my birthday is the 6th of July. And when I checked July on the list, which Baldini can confirm, the note for that month is D sharp.
So what are you implying? Is that relating to a ketone for you?
I think this is the idea that I was kind of speculating was maybe this is a way of finding out.
So if you could test that according to what we just covered, might have even been on the Mandara episode, you could take a violin or something like that, where it's a stringed instrument, and slowly stroke a D or a D sharp or both, and that's supposed to invigorate, it's supposed to re-energize your total body through the keynote idea. But how was that? How was the movie she was giving away? Because I never got to see it.
It's great. It's in about, I think it's 3 or 4 segments, because there's she mentioned the dancer towards the beginning. There's a 5 or 10 minute sequence with a dancer and 432 hertz music, I think it is, and cymatic patterns. It's quite nicely done. And then there's a talk. Mandara gets to talk, of course, and there's a couple of guys who get to speak about different subjects. The last guy was particularly interesting. He touched upon frequency, but the whole thing kind of got me thinking about this keynote idea, because I read the Hermetic Science of, what is it? Is it Math? The A.S. Raleigh book that you've recommended. I read that, and that has a bit about keynote in it, and so I've recently been thinking about this idea, but it was only after I watched their documentary and had the ringing in my ears I remembered this memory from college, and nobody else got to find out their natural key tone of voice while speaking, because the lecturer or the tutor was telling me that that it requires not being aware that you're being listened to, basically, for this purpose. Like right now, if people listening decide to test if my natural tone is D sharp or D right now, it probably won't be, because I'm being recorded and I'm speaking live and that sort of thing. But because at the beginning of lesson he just sat with me and just we were having a conversation and everybody else was doing their thing, he was able to just listen to my voice. And then I related this to the idea of a keynote and thought, I wonder if there's something to it. And of course, when I was sent this information, I had the ringing in my ears, which was the same 2 notes. And then when I got this information with the 12 months and my birthday month happens to correlate with the previous 2 occasions, I thought 3 out of 3.
So how do you match a 7-note scale with 12 months? So there must be sharps or flats in there, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's the full 12.
Yeah, the full 12, because you've got 12. We only use 8 for the, for most Western music for an octave, but there are 12 semitones that we use. So that each one then is correspondent to one of the houses. Yeah.
Right. So we could basically just go from open to the double dot on a guitar.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Mm-hmm. Just up each fret. That's correct.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I had never even heard of that idea, but it absolutely makes sense, especially when you consider, again, electromagnetic frequencies being influenced from the sky clock. It absolutely would make sense as when you, again, overlay it with all these other ideas. It certainly makes sense. I think I think Mark is definitely on to some terrific ideas here.
All right, let's move on. Is it, meaning the pineal, capable of receiving thought from other keys or registers and also sending thought back out to those other keys or registers? If this were the case, then the concept of a collective consciousness would certainly be viable. One mind receiving thought from another key or register could develop that thought, which could then be sent back and later received by another mind to develop further. This could also suggest that some thought received from the collective consciousness could have traveled through the minds of those who have since died, our ancestors, contributing to the concept of genetically ancestrally inherited knowledge. And some thought from the collective consciousness, being of multiple keys and registers or planes of existence, could have traveled through the minds of other beings from those planes of existence. Should such planes and beings exist, of course, and Crow, doesn't this sound a lot like our work with Jung?
Yeah, this comes a lot closer to not taking it too far, like a gray alien with an anal probe. That's way, way, way too far. I'm not even trying to be funny, although I knew Baldini was going to laugh. It's just there's no, you can't do that. You got to have something more than that. But if
this
you
is
go
the unsubverted version.
Yeah, right. If you go through the versions, there's the idea in almost every old, including the Christian mystics, that there's a spiritual plane, there's a mental plane, there's a Buddhic plane, a plane called astral, which most places say is the closest plane to where we are. And it starts to make real sense if you've looked at enough other traditions. And by the way, the Christian mystic work by mostly a guy named Curtis is the author. You can look up a lot of his work. It's not bigoted, so it takes a fair shake across all these other traditions, and it adds value. So I would just say, yeah, this rings true to the older way people used to think before we got Rockefellers and Rothschilds in our world.
And the interesting thing is I actually wrote this before reading any sort of, like Manly P. Hall's, Rudolf Steiner. I've still not read any Carl Jung. I've watched your episode recently, but I wrote this document towards the beginning of last year, maybe around this time last year. I think I wrote this. The only book I'd really read anything to do with anything like this is the one that's in the next line, the 30 Years Among the Dead by Carl August Wickland, but I've only read a few pages of that. I think James True recommended it on one of his streams.
Right, after we did the Young episode, everyone made a bunch of disappointing comments that we hadn't covered the Red Book. Of course, we have 2 hours to do what we do. But the point is, I think the Red Book is what most people feel is some of the apex work to get into from Jung.
This brings up the idea too, if with getting in harmony with people, and especially in close proximity, when you consider the idea again of electromagnetic interconnection and why they want us to keep 6 feet apart. And we've talked about this in terms of especially getting together for events like the Solar Return and Plantoberfest, like there was in October. One of the things that's certainly true, and I've noticed this throughout my life, just as observation, is that when you're involved in some sort of team activity, whether that's team sports or for me, it was often playing music with other people in a band setting, that you always tend to adjust to really whatever the lowest person there, right? But if you have, let's say, 5 people playing together, it's sort of the average of all that. And so one person who plays normally at a high level, if he plays with a bunch of people who are less skilled, typically will play not as well. And they almost can't help it. The same if you're playing basketball or some team sport. It always tends to go to kind of the least common denominator, and that the rising tide lifts all boats. If you are the worst player in the group, playing with better players improves your skill level, and so I think it just kind of lends itself to this idea that. There gets this resonance together, and it is palpable and physical in a close proximity situation.
Well, anyone who's played music, I think, knows exactly what you're saying, and it's also the death idea creeping in. That's why we're 6 feet apart, because typically the dead are kept 6 feet below us. But Mark, I would maybe make a suggestion now that I've looked at this a little bit, and certain parts of it, I'm going to look deeper into the muse ideas because it fits with what Jason and I tend to cover. I take this down to its lowest common denominator, and since you've already done Mandara, if you can come to accept that the foundation of it all is vibration, that if it exists, it moves, and work from there. But this feels, the more that I'm connecting up the musical ideas, it feels like you could almost treat it the same idea as the sky clock got treated by the older people when they started to section us down to a religion that was removed from nature. They convinced everybody that you didn't need the whole sky clock, all 7 luminaries. And then they convinced everyone that the sun was the most powerful, which it is, but it was a lens. So it lensed all the power, which it does. And we know this is true of light, too, because we can take sunlight and bust it out into 7 colors, which is typically how it's described. I think I'd go at this using those foundational ideas.
Jason made a pretty good point on, I think it was Jeranism, maybe on Monday, about the idea that maybe in the Bible, the word and light are essentially the same thing.
Word, light, and frequency.
That's it.
Yep.
That's right.
Well, they have the same foundation no matter how you look at it. So, yeah. That's the whole slot test, right? That's myopic science trying to convince us that things are not knowable. It's a wave and a particle. It's just
no,
it's
not.
Ridiculous. How about let's get down to brass tacks. If it exists, it vibrates. Yep. Who gives a damn how you want to describe it beyond that?
Yeah. The only reason they had to describe it as a particle because they had to get it to propagate through a vacuum of space, and if there's no media, there's no wave, and so they had to call it a particle and created a photon out of just a rectal extraction they pulled out of their butt. There's absolutely no evidence for it whatsoever.
It's problematic coming up with solid evidence for a lie.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's true.
Well, you kind of have to work hard at it, don't you?
You do.
You don't work as hard. You don't work that hard on the lie. It's all your efforts spent on the minds of the people.
I was just going to say it. You don't have to focus on the details of the lie. What you have to do is keep people in a hypnotic state so they just believe anything you say, right? So they believe you're smart, they're stupid, and they have to believe you.
Yep. Floridius Maximus.
Yes.
Okay, next section. This concept fits well with the work of Carl August Wickland, 30 Years Among the Dead, in which it is suggested that mental disturbances such as psychosis and schizophrenia are caused by obsessing spirits. The spirit or incorporeal self which departs upon death and has become lost and restless through the lack of understanding of death. It is suggested that when an individual suffers an emptiness or openness, these obsessing spirits can invade or be received by the empty, open individual. Some have reported the experience of thinking thoughts which are not their own, meaning a thought was dropped or placed into their mind, in their own mind's voice, which was not theirs. Sometimes these voices are benevolent, other times malevolent. Either way, in musical terms, this could be described as another composer or thinker placing notes or thoughts into a pre-existing composition or mind, making the notes or thoughts a part of the same key or register or plane of existence, but still not of the original composition, the individual's mind.
There's been work done that I thought was top notch, and I can't remember the source right now, that wanted to attribute drug abuse, alcoholism, any number of things to basically this idea. And some of the Christian mystics took this down the line and claimed that the astral plane has a ghetto. Basically, there's a dark side of the astral plane. Just like here, there's good people, bad people. And that all the negative influence comes from the dark side there, or the malevolent influences. It's quite interesting, and those are two disparate sources. One comes from a scientist who was actually a psychologist, I think, who got drummed out of town for his ideas, and the other was Christian mystics, both saying the same thing.
Well, we do call alcohol spirits for a reason.
That's a fact.
And I can also say that the member of my family who passed away before I was born, who had schizophrenia and psychosis and all sorts of problems, it stemmed from alcoholism. And the way he died was suicide. And when he committed suicide, he wrote on one side of the page, he wrote a nice poem. And on the other side of the page, he wrote a grotesque poem. And he was my dad's uncle. And just before Christmas, a couple of days before Christmas, my grandma passed away because of alcohol. Essentially, she had, since the lockdown regulations had started, and because my grandma was atheist, she was drinking and smoking since she was about 14 years old, but she was also very active, very lucid, completely coherent, and she throughout the lockdown, because she couldn't really do anything, she was just drinking more, and it obviously has a negative impact, and eventually she had a fall, and the next morning she didn't wake up, she died in her sleep. And that sort of links in a way, because the alcohol, again, like you were just saying, spirits and alcohol, there's something to it. And my grandma also was Irish heritage. That's where I get my Irish heritage, is through my grandma. And like I said, it was her brother who had the schizophrenia and psychosis. And then when you think about the larger scale of, like, cultural trope of Ireland or Scotland, or well, even Liverpool to some degree, I suppose, is alcohol.
Yeah.
And when you think about also what did the powers that be do to the Native American population, or a lot of
Firewater. Yeah. It's interesting too, because certainly, again, in modern Western society anyway, that alcohol is highly promoted as the feel-good drug of choice, and yet it does demonstrably close down your ability to see better and see through things. If you catch my meaning there, while they have outlawed and made really just kind of made anathema anything that might open you up a bit. So if you have anything that might thin the veil a little bit, that becomes, that's a moral turpitude. You have a character flaw, right? If you, for example, take any hallucinogens or whatever, why should that matter? And yet it's perfectly fine. In fact, one of the essential businesses open during this past year, of course, was alcohol sales. So,
well, go to any lower income neighborhood in this country and count the number of liquor stores per capita, and it tells the tale of how they're used, because you have to have a liquor license. Matter of fact, in the place I'm at, there are so few liquor licenses, you basically have to wait for someone to die to get a new liquor license. So how is it that all these places are approved in such great quantity to sell the liquor in places like that? That was the whole, what was that? Not the Watts riots, the ones in the early 90s. with
Rodney
the
King?
trucker, the fake
Los Angeles.
trucker, that whole place. I've been there. It's just every convenience store there just about is a liquor store.
Okay. This concept would also fit with Walter Russell's The Universal One, considering his suggestion is that everything is light and therefore frequency and energy, which I completely and utterly agree with. If the incorporeal self is energy, why not thoughts and memories? And if thoughts and memories are energy, could they be stored somewhere like a collective consciousness? Can they be sent and received? Can they be maneuvered by those with the know-how, carrying the intent of the sender? And if this can be done with thoughts and memories, could then the same be done with or by lost and restless spirits or obsessing spirits? Well, I absolutely think yes, because as Crow and I have said many times, the only true magic really is in your mind. It's the only place you can really create something from nothing.
Yeah.
Yep, and for sure, we have demonstrated, and they have never been able to identify where memories are held, and it does not seem to be located in the brain at all, which again comes back to the idea that there is some sort of resonance field around you, and that it is electromagnetically in you. And there's certainly lots of anecdotal tales of people who get, especially heart transplants, who then pick up very distinct memories of the donor. Seemingly impossible in any other way. So fascinating stuff.
I've got an OtterBox for mine. I don't know about you guys.
Can you put it through a phase shifter?
Oh, yeah. I want it to a wah-wah pedal.
Yeah.
Original script logo. Come on.
Also,
Pretty-
this ties back a bit to Jerry Mozinski, who I mentioned. Beth Martin's interviewed the idea with schizophrenia and psychosis being, say, the voices coming from an external source as opposed to being intrinsic to the person suffering from either disease, illness, whatever you want to call it.
Balance. They've never proven that either. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
But that makes a lot of money, doesn't it?
There's many unanswered questions about things like schizophrenia and psychosis and things of that nature. And, I think there may be a spiritual component to it as well. This kind of makes sense in a lot of ways because oftentimes people who are labeled as schizophrenics or anything like that, they do have what they would describe as an outside influence affecting their mind. So, that's kind of one of those things that's very subjective to look at. There's no way to really prove or disprove that type of a theory. I know that a lot of the cyberneticists have looked at these ideas to try to better understand, the actual, how should we say, the mechanism of what causes these different types of what we would call, I guess, mental illnesses or neurological effects in people, such as schizophrenia, psychosis, these kind of things. And I don't know, per se, if they ever looked at it through the lens of like alchemy or these intrinsic occultic ideas or the ideas of like the spiritual nature of things or these external sources affecting these people. But it's been proven that frequencies can actually have this effect on people. They could implant sounds directly to your brain. They could transmit information, sound waves directly into your brain, past your eardrums, into your head. And it goes way beyond that, too. They could actually implant thoughts with these different frequencies, too. Right.
I was just thinking about the celebrities, like this idea that they, say someone like Lady Gaga, clearly she practically openly admits that she's part of like blood rituals and cannibal rituals and all sorts of crazy stuff. But it starts to make you wonder. I wonder how much of that is her, as in the person who was born and raised, whatever her real name is, and how much of it is sort of like an MK Ultra situation where you sometimes see people glitch out a bit on videos. Like Shaquille O'Neal is constantly just.
Yeah.
And you also have to wonder, is there another spirit taking up residence in there at that point?
That's what I mean, yeah.
And I would suggest I would suggest these MK Ultra ideas and these ideas of using frequency to implant ideas or thoughts into people's minds. Well, they're getting this from somewhere, aren't they? This is a replication of something else. So they perhaps would be looking at these spiritual concepts and the thought about maybe this biofield, this intrinsic biofield we all have, and how different dimensional entities or intelligences or things like that could possibly affect people, spirits per se. And there's a lot of different things in the scientific realm that could be looked at that could kind of back up this idea. But I don't know. I don't think that our scientists of today would actually look at something like that. It would be a bridge too far for them.
They don't accept that. But many artists, especially music artists, have explicitly said that they take on another personality or even get possessed by another force that takes them over. They've openly stated
that has been admitted.
Yep.
Yes.
Like talked about Dylan where he talks about the chief of this world.
Yeah, right. And I noticed in the chat earlier, somebody gave shout out to AA, right? And one of the things I'm not a member myself, but I know people who have gone. I know one of the exercises that they do is that they have people early in their process to give a name to their addiction and to basically anthropomorphize it.
Really? I didn't know that one.
Oddly enough, most of them have no problem doing that. They can easily a couple of people, one called it Red, one called it Loomis. I remember those because those are friends of mine that had severe alcohol problems and went to AA. And so that was one of their first exercises was to give it a name. And it became so anthropomorphized over time that, a couple of people have, again, it takes on a very interesting thing. Yeah. So I find it again, just fascinating that is part of their rituals, if you will.
If you want to give power to something, give it a name.
Right.
That's what they say. Yeah, I think that's a kind of a dangerous idea, honestly. If you have some type of an addiction or something, and you want to give it a name and assign a personality trait or something to it, or anthropomorphize it in a way, this is empowering it and kind of creating the situation where this becomes like a type of egregore or a tulpa of sorts that follows you around.
I have a number of issues, and again, I don't really begrudge. I know AA has helped a bunch of people, but I have a number of issues with just some of the basic psychology. That, again, if you go every time you pronounce yourself, "Hi, I'm Bob, and I'm an alcoholic," then you continually think of yourself as that. And most people who have actually gone beyond it, right? They've transcended it. Now think of themselves as, I'm Bob. I'm a former alcoholic. Right. And so you must every cell of your body will work as hard as it can to be whatever you imagine it to be. This is the manifestation of the will, and it's been proven over and over again. And so if you continue to keep yourself in that trap, and if I put it this way, if you spend all of your, just for a day, right? If you spend all of your time thinking about not drinking, you're spending all of your time thinking about drinking. Right. Right. And it would seem to be a miserable kind of hell to me where, again, I would just assume to spend all my time focused on something else and, make that part of my life a distant memory. Right. I've done things of which I wasn't proud, and I can barely even that doesn't even seem like a part of me anymore. I never think of myself as like, oh, I'm still that person over and over again. So I do have problems with some of those aspects of it. But again, I can't say that it hasn't helped a lot of people. So. Yeah, there you go.
Right.
I think it's the support network that does the most for that, as far as AA is concerned. If I had to venture a guess, but I've never had those issues, so I can't speak from personal experience.
You want to know the major difference between an alcoholic and a drunk? A drunk doesn't have to attend the stupid meetings.
Right. There you go. Yeah. No, but the one thing that I've had a conversation with several people in leadership there, right, is that what it never does, while it does do, again, some things and help lead you through some emotional healing and stuff, what it never does is to address the underlying root causes of it. And so most people simply transfer that one addiction for another. Like everybody picks up coffee and cigarettes, whether they ever smoked or drank coffee before they transfer the addiction. So they still have the same issues that caused it, and they can exhibit the exact same behaviors. So many will become gamblers. They just transfer that from one to another. And so they never address the underlying root cause. And that's probably one of the major problems I have. with it is you'll never get beyond it. You're not really It's like a Band-Aid, right? You got a bunch of group of people helping you keep that Band-Aid on, but I don't know. Again, I don't want to spend time bashing. I know that many people, it's helped them a lot, and I wouldn't disparage that. But I think there are better ways.
Right. Yeah, I agree. AA has done some good things for a lot of people, and some people do benefit from that. So, aside from being a little silly about things here, I do respect what they do, but it's not for everyone. It doesn't work for everybody, but there are a vast number who it does work for, and more power to them for that. But
it suppresses
that's beside the point. But you are correct, though. They do just trade one addiction for another in many instances there. So that kind of is like trading one monkey on your back for a different one.
Or a pair of them.
It's still there. Right. Or a pair of them.
I did that. I gave up the leftover cocaine for brand new stuff.
Oh, hey.
Well, it's less tacky.
Oh, dear. I need some Peruvian marching powder now, I guess.
All right, let's finish this document off. We're doing good on time. Many have identified the mentioned incorporeal self by other names, such as the energy body, aura, human biofield, and spirit body. So perhaps there is something worthy of investigation, and music might be a good medium for understanding and illustrating this concept. On a more positive note, and to conclude, it could be said that the initial step to any creative process is transposition, and, therefore, all who think, contemplate, and create are, before anything, transposers. This also makes me think of the whole alchemical process of transmutation, of course.
I couldn't get past that whenever when Mark first presented it to me. It seemed like that was the next step, right? The next natural progression.
I had no clue at the time about alchemy or anything in that sort of field. That was only after I started listening to, I think, some of the Benjamin Bolton episodes that you and Crow have done.
You mean somebody out there actually listens to our show?
A couple.
Oh, you're the other one.
That's good. We'll keep making them then.
Hey, man, I got 3 emails today. I know someone's listening.
There you go.
By listening, you mean complaining, right?
I love taking these ideas, and again, I would give my left nut for a working lab, electromagnetic and cymatics lab, to be able to walk through some of this stuff and to see what are some of the effects if you begin to use things like electromagnetic fields and polarization and water, especially. The work that I've done investigating water and what it's capable of and what it is, it's still it's probably the most magical substance that I have come across ever. It is just remarkable and mind-boggling.
Not the leftover cocaine.
Like the leftover cocaine, but a lot easier to find. It's certainly a lot.
It's a lot easier to find than that, though.
And recover from.
It certainly is, but to be sure, these ideas again with frequency and vibration, harmonics, transposition. This is where my heart lives in terms of trying to understand or get a better grip on the nature of the universe and integrating all the little bits and pieces from sky clock to colors and music and all the different things. It is. This is where I just kind of back up and go, whoa. Mind blown.
You know what it shows me? This is why it blows my mind, because it proves the basis for all our knowing right now is wrong. It's myopic. Science has become myopic, and it's not brand new. Like, we get all these people come on, like RNs and other people's now, that will say we've gone full scientism in this place I worked, where just a few years ago what I'm seeing now would have been unacceptable. But the truth is, I can take you back to the 1900s and show the complete disconnection from real knowing in the scientific field, long before Einstein. It's crazy to think about where we could be and where we probably have been and where we're kind of just stagnating right now.
Would you agree, Crow, that with my observation is that one of the biggest killers of really a good thought, besides them taking away the trivium and not teaching rational thought, but the idea that specialization, that once they compartmentalize
right.
didn't give them the ability to become polymaths, or in any way see more than one basic discipline. Well,
So nobody ever completes a task. It's like
Exactly.
you make this part, you make that part. This other dude puts part of it together.
Exactly. And
That's
you know
exactly
how it works. You know why.
Well, yeah.
Why. You understand that bit, right? That you know how this thing works, but you have no idea why. And you can only kind of get to that when you look at it from a multidisciplinary standpoint, and to see how everything is interconnected. It's like they took that away.
Well, that's the whole point of what science did to us. I mean, that's basically the starting point. It's the basis for how they jacked medicine. What?
Yeah.
My foot hurts, so I got to go see a podiatrist.
Yeah.
So you're telling me the MD doesn't know how the body works? It's the whole kind of dissecting down into compartmentalizing all these things. But even it's worse than that, because even at the basis of each compartment, they're wrong. If you look at, and the thing is like anyone can do this if they have enough time, and that's part of the problem with our world. Nobody has the time. You got to make money. You got to pay your rent. It's been made so convoluted that most people will never have the time. But you'll come across, if it exists, it vibrates. There's a foundation. Every other thing you do will stand on that. And then you'll realize, wait a minute, this prism breaks the sun into 7 colors. Every other thing you do will stand on that. And that's not where we're at anymore. And it's also the reason why we can't go any further. And look what we've got. We've got a periodic table of elements, which is the be-all and end-all to science, and they're not elements. Yeah. They're combinations. They're provably combinations.
Yeah.
Right. And when you actually look at the way that our society has been steered into this mindset, this compartmentalization, it's the complete opposite of what the controllers do. The controllers use a cybernetics approach for everything, and this is the holistic systems control approach. And that's where the real disconnect is, because there's a select few people at the top of the power structure that have a better understanding of these things and look at it from that holistic perspective. They have the overall picture, whereas our sciences and just the way our world is built, it's all in these little sub-compartments. It's all compartmentalized. You specialize in this, you specialize in that, and you may understand that field fairly well or fairly effectively, but when you try to transpose that into another field, it doesn't go so well because you don't understand the other field, and that kind of creates a disconnect there. And that's why it's hard for somebody who's specialized in one thing to be able to understand certain other processes in another field.
There's a perfect example. What Wayne just said, there's a perfect example in the world we all live in. There's one set of rules for everything that's big, and there's another set of rules for everything that's small. If that doesn't underline exactly what Wayne just said, and you can't make them jive, and they'll never be able to make them jive because they're both BS.
And even what's his name at MIT, he even put the 3 on it, right? So you've got the quantum scale, the very micro. You've got the natural scale, right? The Newtonian scale, and then you've got the planetary scale. Right, and never the 3 shall meet. You could say never the twain shall meet, but classical physics and quantum physics, they've been saying that they didn't go together. But when you get to the planetary scale, not demonstrable like gravity, right? None of those things demonstrable at any level other than you have to imagine it. But one of the things that I think really sidetracked and distracted, created a huge disconnect, is the presentation of the idea following like the Industrial Revolution, that that mankind is a machine. That you are a machine, that you're no longer organic and connected to nature in any way. And then once we got into the idea of technology in terms of the computer, they then began likening the mind to a computer. And then you'll hear all the time, it's garbage in, garbage out. It's programming. And we even use these terms, programming. But the more that you consider yourself that way, the more you are separated from nature. right? And so they get you out of the idea that you're connected to nature at all. Look at the way we live. They've done everything they can to get us as far away from nature, from shoes, to we stay inside. I mean, people like even kids. I don't want to get dirty, yucky. Oh my God, it's an animal. It's scary. They have no connection whatsoever to the natural world, and especially in the city, it's like they've done everything possible to get you as far away from the natural world. And I think it begins with the idea of this old hyper materialism that you are a machine, and you're not. And that's like the worst metaphor possible. You're not a machine, and you could take a car apart and see how it works and put it back together, and it will work. If you take Fred and take him apart to see how he works and try to put him back together, you can't. Fred ain't going nowhere. Fred dead. Right. So we have no idea how life works at really at any level.
See, the part of the problem that underlies what you just pointed out is that without that foundation, you can't know things. You'll never understand anything about numbers other than what you can pick up or logically deduce from what others are telling you. And if you can't do that on your own, then you have no barometer in life. You see things, but you don't have the tools to gauge whether they're helpful or not. And Jason and I have gone round. As a matter of fact, we just had the good fortune to interview this morning for a very short period of time Gregory Mannarino, who's in the money markets. I finally wanted to get a guy who's clearly honest and good-hearted in what he is presenting. And he hits on the crypto. And this is the whole problem with crypto. And no matter how you try to describe it to people, they're never going to understand the underlying reason why it's a nightmare. And that's because of foundationally what you know it's based on. And it's not easy to describe to people because they're going to say, well, you could get rich on this. Well, yes, you could. You absolutely, if you were a clever person right now, you might very well be able to get rich on crypto. There's all these other
pet rocks too.
Right. But there's all these other problems. But the problem is the base of it is binary. The base of everything binary works off exactly what you've said. Well, we used to be a body, then we were a machine, and it goes in that direction. And pretty soon we had a computing machine, so the mind started getting looked at. See, the underlying mechanism of these things is if there is actually an evil, the definition of these foundations is that. It's, people would call it demonic or other things. It's unhelpful, and it is these words and these things because it is contrary to nature.
Yeah, it's the antithesis of natural.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So exactly that it leads to what again Wayne is always talking about, which is transhumanism. And so if you think of yourself as a computer, then it makes a perfect sense that you want to put a chip into it, right? To overclock it. I mean, I can remember in the 1980s them telling us that they could implant a memory chip in our head to give us extra memory storage and perfect memory. I even thought at the time, like, what language is that going to be in? Like COBOL, Fortran? How are you going to do that?
Johnny Mnemonic, baby.
We don't even know how memory is stored organically. We have no fucking idea. And so how are you going to translate that into a storage chip? It's retarded. I'm sorry, the R word.
There we go.
I'm pretty sure you're going to have to use a 100th monkey.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems again not only preposterous, but that people would accept that to a point where now Elon Musk is we got it in a pig. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What? And so it speaks pig Latin? Is that how you programmed it? Is that the language it speaks?
Carpe diem.
Well, think about what you were just saying though, and I've heard these examples where people have been transplanted and weird things have happened that seem to be related to what the donor was about. Now think about the vaccines. Some of them have chimpanzee
monkey
parts. And some of them have aborted fetal kidney cells from I think a strain collected in the 70s. So if all this is true,
in a lab, oh my God, that makes me sick.
And so people are going to get good at climbing trees.
Yeah, it'd be warping your antenna, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, if the premise of morphic resonance has validity, and it seems to have every foundational idea seems to be solid there, then what you would be absorbing is being grown in a lab for 30 plus years and all the gross things that they did and all their intention, everything that they intend harmful is in it. I mean, how could it do anything but harm you? Oh, it's just
When you look at these things from the concept of, say, we function as a type of radio tuner, tuning our consciousness here, what they're doing with that is they're changing your channel. That's exactly what they're doing. They're tuning your resonance or your frequency to this other bandwidth, and that's.
I'm with you. I'm actually with you, Wayne.
It's lowering, your consciousness, your conscious capability.
Well, we didn't even touch on video games and the HD TVs and the computer screen. I'm sitting in front of a 5K computer screen. How much does this fry my freaking brain?
It's probably frying your brain pretty good. I mean, I'm sure we're all pretty well getting fried right now.
Nice saute, Jason.
Well, that's good. Just make sure you use coconut butter.
Medium rare.
Keep it natural. Mm-hmm.
Be careful with that coconut butter. It'll make you fat. It's good, though.
But it's oh so good in coffee.
Saute your brain. But yeah, I see that somebody in chat's talking about they want us to be cannibals. And of course, they've been presenting this idea for some time now. And it does seem like that they're pushing even further to that. And can you imagine again, then them putting all that trauma, getting people to eat each other, all the trauma that they would be recycling over and over and over.
Soylent Green is people?
Well, yeah, Charlton Heston only did
only the poor ones,
right? There was a reason.
Right.
Yeah.
So the 10 Commandments and Soylent Green. And Ben.
And one of the most famous actors of all time. That's his final movie. He does the death scene. What's his name? Edward G. Robinson, I think.
Oh, yeah.
That was a golden age top. The man who started to try to replace him was Steve McQueen. So you're talking the apex here. There's an actual poker movie where the two of them are in it. And in the movie, he looks Steve McQueen in the eye and says, "You're not ready to replace me as king yet, kid." They're saying in the movie what's actually being done in real life. And Edward G., slowly departs stage left in the 70s. Last show is Soylent Green. And Steve McQueen comes up on top until, of course, he gets butt cancer. And then goes down to use the Gerson method, and then badmouths the reason that he's going to die is because he went down to use the Gerson method. When that wasn't good enough, they took Michael Landon and put him on the Gerson method and did the same thing, trotted him up to Johnny Carson's Tonight Show to say, "Oh, I would have lived if I just wouldn't have gone down to do Gerson." So you've got to realize that whenever you see these apex people in movies, it's for a reason. And I would suggest, even though it's not a very good movie, Soylent Green was there for a reason.
Absolutely.
This happened with a friend of mine. I'm not going to name him, but a friend of mine at college, he got cancer. He was 17, and he did chemotherapy. It kind of reduced it, but obviously chemotherapy decimates all of your cells. And so the cancer came back when he was around about 20, 21. And so he decided to go with the Gershwin method, and he went to Mexico to get this done. And I remember at the time I was on social media, and I got to see his before and after scans, and it showed unequivocally that the tumors had shrunk from the Gershwin method. But unfortunately, if I was to speculate, I'd probably suggest that the initial chemotherapy made it so it was much more difficult for the Gershwin method to work. And
they
then the
tell
Gershwin
you that.
method
They tell you a couple things. If you've done chemo, they tell you unequivocally, if you've ever done dialysis, then you're done. All bets are off. And they'll tell my father spent the last years of his life on dialysis, and they don't even know how it works, believe it or not. But they put they put you on a machine, and they're filtering everything out of your life source, your blood. As a matter of fact, that's how he departed. He said, "I'm not going to chemo, or I'm not going to dialysis anymore," which means I'll be in a coma within a week or two, which was true. And that's how he decided to leave. But Gerson will tell you there's certain things that once they're done, and it's Western medicine things, by the way.
Yeah, my friend actually did he last year, I think it was the early last year, he passed away, and because of course it didn't work, but he was writing a book because he realized it was working, it was doing something, but obviously that never got to come to fruition. But then the BBC over here made a documentary covering what happened to him, basically, but they were basically just just trashing the Gershwin method and the police for giving false hope.
Unfortunate. I will say that if you talk to any honest pharmacist, they will tell you, or chemistry person who does that kind of chemistry, that they don't know almost 100% of pharmaceutical medication. They don't know the mechanic of it. The mechanics of it are unknown. It has an effect. They can measure it. So it has an effect on a certain number of people, and so it gets qualified. They all have side effects. But in terms of the actual process, they have no idea. They just throw a bunch of chemicals at you, and it causes your body to react in certain ways. And if a certain number of people react a certain way, then it gets approved for use as long as it has limited side effects, or at least that's what we're told. But almost none of them do they know the actual function, how it works, and that's almost every single pharmaceutical compound that's made today.
Yeah, the mechanism of action is not really fully understood in many of these things, but they do know it does work to a certain degree, but they can't say exactly how.
Or why, yeah. Exactly.
Right. I wanted to bring up before, I suppose a turn away from some of the depressing stuff is something positive, is the tuning fork therapy. Now, I don't have the tuning fork, so I can't really afford to spend on that, especially with delivery costs to the UK. But Carla Adams, who was on, I think she's been on Crow twice now, right, Jason?
Yeah.
Is it twice?
Yep.
She's been on,
Yep.
Carla Adams. She has, of course, her website, ancestralriver.com. And if you sign up, she sends a free audio if you sign up to the newsletter, she'll send a free. And she also has a YouTube channel called Ancestral River. And she has an upload there. And I've been listening to them. And this links into the frequency ideas. But one thing I've noticed, I don't know if anyone else, like anyone here, even in live chat, has listened to any of Carla Adams' stuff, but me personally, it puts me out. Like I'll listen to it when I go to bed, so I can just sort of meditate on it, I guess. And for some reason, it puts me out, but it's not like it puts me to sleep, because as soon as the audio finishes, it's like I switch back on conscious again. Like not unconscious, I switch back to consciousness again. It's like I go into like just a power saving mode. And then as soon as the audio ends, I click back into consciousness. And it's a strange thing that happens about halfway through both of the audios that I have of hers with the tuning forks. And it's not something that I sort of predicted would happen, or like a self-fulfilling prophecy or placebo or anything like that. This is something I initially, when I was approaching, I thought, I don't see how this could work over headphones if you're not in the room with the person with the frequency. And so I just decided to listen to it with a bit of cynicism. And the first time I listened to it, it shut me off, and then the audio clicked, when you hear the hiss and the audio clicks off, and I was conscious again, but I hadn't been asleep at all, but I couldn't remember the entire half hour.
Interesting.
I don't know if anyone else has had that.
And what was the source material again? What were you listening to?
This is Carla Adams, who's been on Crow 777 Radio.
So it was the stream that she was on, and you just
she uploads. She has a YouTube channel called Ancestral River, which has one upload so far, which is about an hour long. And then also, if you sign up to her newsletter on the website, ancestralriver.com, I think she's still doing this, but she sends a free audio, which is half an hour long. And back when Carla was on Crow 777, I signed up and I received the audio. And that's when I was a bit cynical about it, but I wanted to know, because I like to do things firsthand, so I know personally. And that very night I listened to it and I was kind of cynical about it, but then for half an hour, I can't remember what happened the half an hour I listened to it.
Interesting stuff, yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
Because I recall,
and it's happened each time.
I recall just about the same time that I was researching the nature of the geometry of the Earth, and became a geometric agnostic. And that would have been right at the close of 2014, about October through November of 2014. But I had an experience in which I had the radio on, which I very rarely listen to the radio, and an advertisement came on, and then suddenly, who knows how long later, I suddenly snapped to and realized that I'd been out for some period of time, just completely spaced out of it. I had this really intense feeling like something had triggered. There was something embedded in what I was listening to that had caused it, and it shook me up really bad. I told my wife about it at the time, and I haven't had anything since then, but it did make me start looking more into the idea of trigger mechanisms. And then when I began to see it in people, specifically when addressing ideas, presenting ideas that are perhaps unusual or outside of the beaten path, and watching them all behave in a similar manner to one another, that seemed very inorganic and unusual. And I started to come up with this idea that it was a trigger mechanism, right? That people were becoming triggered in certain ways when presented, when cognitive dissonance kicked in. It would like set a trap and set it right off. And so I began looking closer. And this is actually kind of going all the way back to, this is some of the basis about which I started researching what I now call the Awakening Project, right? It was like why some people break out of it and some don't, because it does absolutely seem as though it is a kind of hypnosis. It is a sort of spell that people are under. They are not thinking. They are simply going along with a program. And anything that begins to challenge that causes a mechanism to kick in that they seem to be pre-programmed with that gets them right back on track. It's a sort of self-censorship and high emotional involvement is part of it. They get instantly very triggered and very angry. And I see the same thing with what we would call mask holes. They instantly elevate. Something is triggering them. And how the mechanism exactly, I'm not sure, but I would suspect that, television, media is probably largely responsible for it, especially since I don't consume any of it anymore. But
we should rewrite that old song. There's a fear in my beer.
Yeah, there you go. The fear in my beer.
What was beer bug in English again, from Latin to English? I won't say the actual name of the beer bug because censorship, but what was the actual translation from Latin to English?
Who are you addressing? What are we talking about?
Anyway, you were just saying about the beer bug. I won't name it, but from Latin to English, it means crown, poison.
Oh,
poison
right.
the crown.
Poison the
and
crown.
then when you relate it to what we're talking about here in the documents as well, that
So, a mind.
about the tie-in.
Did you guys? Did I show you what Google Translate was doing?
Yes, going
With
back.
that?
to
I
the
think
lab.
that worked
The quarantine
here as well.
thing.
Unreal.
Yeah,
Yes.
didn't we do that?
Covidius minimus.
We did that somewhere. We
It's
discussed
on
it
Beth
somewhere.
Martin's
We did
channel.
do that, didn't we?
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
even remember.
You sent it to me,
On
and
Beth
then
Martin's
and I don't remember where. Maybe I put it on the website. I know I did something with it because I want people to see it before they change the algorithm again.
I wonder if it's still doing it. Does anyone remember what the thing was?
Yeah, it was just quarantine to Latin and back.
All right, everybody do it right now. Go to Google Translate.
All right.
Let's just see. Let's see if it's still making the announcement. Google Translate, you put in quarantine. Oops. Oh, you got to go to the page. Go to Google
Yeah,
Translate
go on the
page.
actual page.
Yeah, so you go to quarantine and you go to.
Mine's already on English and Latin. Bit weird.
Mine's not. I got to go find Latin. So JKL Latin. Okay. And then you go back. And then you go back.
Ooh,
40.
Mine's
40.
changed.
yeah.
Let me try it again.
They changed it to 40.
Yeah. And it's not changing.
Why 40? That doesn't make sense either. Does it?
Well, that proves to
quad
you
was
this
first.
was going on all over the world, and now
Yeah.
they've changed it.
Yeah.
Yep,
did it
they're
about
messing with
4
it.
times.
So this might be significant too. 40 what? What are we talking about now?
Well, it used to be quarantine was 40, meant 40 days. 40 days of isolation. That's what
Ah.
it basically meant.
Oh, so this is actual, it's literal definition then.
the literal definition. So it comes back to quadragnita or whatever. But originally, quarantine was 40 days of isolation. That's what it meant.
There you go.
So that's what it was supposed to be. Is you were supposed to spend 40 days apart.
And 40 nights?
40 days.
Yeah, that does invoke that esoteric idea of 40 days and 40 nights as well.
Sure does. But yeah, it had turned all sorts of crazy stuff going back and forth. And I see that happen fairly frequently with phrases, right? If you put it in and then go back and forth, it continually modulates and change. And so it wasn't a surprise that it was doing that. What was a surprise is how it came out.
Right.
It's been weird that it's not changing, right? It's just going back and forth between 40 and the quadragnita or whatever. So I'm sure I'm butchering that, but it's
yeah, but just the fact that that's changed tells you something, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
There must have been some conscientious code writer somewhere,
Yeah, I don't know.
because I can't imagine that's revelation of method.
So, all right, guys, so we're definitely there. Let's talk about what everybody's got coming up. Baldini?
Let's see. Tomorrow morning, a bit more cocky pop until we figure out a scheduling thing. I know that Rose has been overloaded trying to keep up with you guys, doing two a week.
Just a bit.
Crazy people. Yeah, messing up our group. No, anyway, I'll continue doing that probably with Karen B as long as she agrees to show up, and then I'm trying to get a schedule change so that we can get the band back together. And then, of course, on the weekend I do Unintended Consequences Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. on my channel, and that's Pacific time, UTC -7. And then Sunday 2 streams 7 a.m. Ancient Wisdom for a Modern World, and then in the evening 5 p.m. Every other week, semi-weekly, is with our very own Wayne McCroy with Sola Scriptura, and then the opposite weeks, the alternating weeks, are sort of scriptural. So catch those streams, and they always have a little noodling in front of them, which is just a bit of improvisation, extemporaneous keyboard playing, and so we have a good time with the folks there. So all the usual suspects show up. Come and join us; you'll have fun.
Cool. Wayne, what you got?
Only thing I got going is I just posted yesterday, I think it was, the conclusion of the Unseen Forces series I was doing on my channel, going over the book by the same name by Manly P. Hall. So that's up there now for people to look at. I was just on The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray Valentine as well. That's out there. And I did a show called Night Flight, which is a channel over on YouTube headed up by Judith Quoba. I did an interview with her just a couple weeks ago, and that's up and posted right now. Don't have anything else going on this week, so I'll be on with Baldini on Sunday for Sola Scriptura, and then back here next Wednesday night.
Mark, thank you for being here again. Let's give you a big old round of applause. I'm sorry? Oh, no.
Thank you for having me again.
Yes, absolutely. And let's give you a big old round of applause because it's like 4-something a.m. where you're at. So, woohoo. Well done, you. Do you have anything you want to talk about that you're doing, though?
The next thing I'm doing is sleeping.
Well done. And duly earned.
I'm a big fan.
I'm a big fan as well. Yeah.
Well, I should
and
point
then
it
I'll
out.
be up for the Poppycock report, presumably. Last week, not last week, the week before, whenever I was last on with you guys, I woke up the next day and it was like 2 p.m. here, which is exactly what time the Poppycock report starts.
Yeah.
So I just got in there.
Well, I was going to say, in this current era, the only freedom you're going to see is when you're dreaming. So there's something to be said for it.
I do a lot of lucid dreaming. Is something I've done since I was a child, and I never realized that it was a different thing. I always just assumed that's how everybody dreams, and then it's only when I was an adult, because you don't really speak to people about dreaming too much in today's society, I suppose. And as soon as I did, and I realized I was doing something different, I was like, uh-oh.
Remember what I said about hair and eye color?
Well, yeah, there's something to, I mean, color and vibration. What's red hair all about, and green eyes?
Yeah, Mark's got really deep into that topic too, is with the red hair and genealogy and the Gaelic language and going back into language. We've had great conversations. He's again a bright guy with diverse interests. So
I suppose that is the next thing for me, probably, if Baldini doesn't mind me saying this, but I think at some point Baldini and suggested I go on his channel and run through some of my thought experiments that I've sent to him regarding the Gaelic language and connections to culture and heritage and everything going on there. There seems to be correlation.
Fascinating stuff, man. There is correlation all over. I mean, correlation not necessarily causation, but man, it is some fascinating stuff, and it does appear again like they've both embedded things in the language and intentionally hid it from us. So,
which reminds
me, they tried to outlaw it. Anything they tried to outlaw must have value, right? Gaelic's one of those things.
I've just remembered last time you asked me what's crow in Gaelic, and I found out afterwards it's Preacorn.
How do you spell it?
Preachon. Is it O N or A N? The letter, Preacorn.
Like preach on.
Preach on.
Preach on.
Yeah, a bit like that.
Brethren, preach on. I'm
the
kind of
letter
digging
E
that.
has a grave marking over it. I've put it in this Skype chat that we're in now. If I'll put it back in again so you don't have to scroll back too far. But yeah, I found that out. And another thing you mentioned before was spirits. I just remembered now. The Irish Gaelic translation is I can't remember the first word, but the second word is ishka, which means water. And the first word translates into English as breath. So the descriptor comes second. So it means breath water or water breath water. So breathe water. So breath is spirit water.
Yes.
Wow.
This is in Gaelic.
Man, this is awesome.
Another one.
Some of those old Gaelic crow images they used to carve into stone.
There's one more that I learned the other day because the part I'm up to in some of the lessons I'm teaching myself is descriptive, like how to describe something. So if you're describing something as true, the translation of true is fear.
Wow.
FIOR, but it's pronounced identically to FEAR in English. Fear is true.
Mark, do you have a before I forget website or YouTube channel? People are asking.
I mean, I guess I technically have a YouTube channel, but I don't have anything uploaded to it. I noticed a few people did subscribe after the last one and were probably disappointed thereafter. But I think for now, it'll mostly be here if you're still want to welcome me here, and also on Baldini's channel. That is my first public speaking was on Baldini's channel, which was episode 30, I think. It should be called The Maker's Mark or something like that.
I think that is true. In fact, I will see if I can find that real quick and drop that in the
I don't have Rose's memory, so
I couldn't remember which one it was either. So you did actually better than I did. I'll see if I can find that in the playlist here. And let's see.
The conversation I had with Baldini was to do with his Awakening project, because that's how I initially got in contact with Baldini, was sending him my details for the Awakening project, and then the way I properly introduced myself was through this document that we ran through tonight. And so the first time Baldini invited me onto his podcast was sort of going through how I woke up, basically, the Awakening project, like how that happened, and then we went into a little bit of what I was taught at university, I think.
Yep. The semiotics, yeah, bit of that.
Yeah.
And then we got into this document. Just really kind of touched on it and used that as a kind of a jumping off point. And then he did a conversation with Red Fox as well, just specific to that topic. But again, just a lot of great work that Mark puts out in terms of thought experiments. And like myself, he's interested in so many different topics. He would go in circuitous routes, right? But that's where I think a lot of the good stuff is, right? Is the interdisciplinary route. And when you see how many things are connected and the way that they're connected, it really opens your mind to see that it is connected. And that's part, I think, one of the things that they tried to steal from us is the fact that it is.
I also can't do what other people do with some people look into really dark subjects, and like I can deconstruct things with semiotics, rhetoric, and aesthetics. The methodology I've been taught, I can deconstruct things, but I've just found recently that doing that is kind of like I'm not creating anything, and I like to create. So this is where my thought experiments. I actually emailed Billingtano, who might be in the live chat, saying that I was going to try and lay off the thought experiments for a little while and go back to fictional writing for a little bit, because that's how I taught myself grammar and writing after I finished university. I should have done it before I finished university, but I decided I'm going to go back to some fictional writing for a little while just to create, because it drains a bit. It's a bit like I still utilize semiotics for my fictional writing to try and I like encoding things in there, but something good. So when I'm sat there all day looking through all these books and texts, and it's good, fascinating, man. But like deconstructing things, eventually it starts to just kind of, you start seeing how kind of the ugly side of the realm we are in.
You got to create something. But even if you're deconstructing, like the way we do it when we're creating a show, which isn't all the way satisfying. That's why we have the episode images. That's really the only time I get to create regularly. Although I could be playing my instruments more, but unfortunately, since I got the dog, there's been a lot less of that. But maybe I'll pick it up.
I've played guitar in about a year since I started doing this.
Yeah, you got to make something. You got to create something, whatever it is you're into.
And we are having. I'm doing a little jam session there at the Solar Return. So if you got a wild hair up your butt and a little leftover cocaine, bring that mandolin down.
I wish, man.
I do too, man. That would be a gas.
I'm kind of stuck in the I got to do the long run here right now. So
if I start swimming now, I might make it to us for that meetup.
You might. Yeah. Ride an iceberg. All right, Crow. We've got a big one coming up this Thursday. Well, tonight, I guess.
Tonight, actually, when we get off this, I'm gonna put it out.
Yeah, so this is a big deal. What happened here? This is somebody from Northern Europe who reached out to us, who actually went through the trouble of trying to chase down all of the documents of his birth.
All of them.
Like all of them, right? And it was quite unbelievable, really. I don't know how much we want to let out here, but as he was going through it, it was just like, holy shit.
Yeah, he if you look at some of the seminal contributions in the terms of personhood and these things, I would put Kallenbach at the top of the seminal contributions, for the simple reason that what Kallenbach laid down changed everything if you're a thinking person, reminding everyone that you don't gain life at the birth canal, that you've had it for a long time before that, since the zygote. But our guest today, his name's Sui Generis, which is actually a legal Latin term you can look up, but he got every single frickin' document, and by the way, he's in a Protestant country, and so all the church involvement is Protestant, proving that there's no separation between the brands, because the same thing happens to him that happens to everybody, and it was a completely Protestant country that it happened in, but he uncovers some things, because he gets every document, including these things that they have in his country that's probably not common here, called what was it, Jason? The birth room notes or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, the description of stuff.
Right. It allows him to reconstruct the timeline and show where every document goes. And during the course of it, he adds a few things I don't think people are commonly aware of. Other people like KL, seminal, because they're standing up to forge a door out of the system where people can still exist and go to a 7-Eleven if they need to. There have been a few people. I can't list them all off the top of my head, but this one adds to the conversation, and it's indisputable. He's got the documents. They're all certified. They're all legal beagle, if you give a damn about that kind of thing, and then logic puts the rest of it together in an organized timeline, so it's quite a thing.
Yep, and of course, let's just make sure we get this really stressed out there that both Baldini and myself will be at the Solar Return Festival that our friend Karen B is putting on. So, Karen, if you're still here and you want to drop the link, if not, we'll keep talking about it. It's on March 27th in Greenville, South Carolina. I'll be playing a full acoustic set of my original material. Baldini, I'm not entirely certain what you are going to be doing, because you're asking for all these different instruments, so I think it must be something interesting.
Well, I'm going to do some, noodling of my own, but I just set up a jam session. So I got people who are interested who are coming to the Solar Return Festival. If you play an instrument and you're interested in sitting in for a little jam session, we've got a drummer or two going to sit in, a guitar player, bass player. We're trying to gather different parts and pieces and just kind of do a regular old good time, hoedown, hootenanny jam session. And so if you're interested in that, send me an email, unintended.consequences3@gmail.com. And we'll try to get you hooked up with that so we can kind of rotate around and get people to sit in and just jam. It should be pretty straightforward. I told a couple of folks I'm not planning on having everybody work up songs or anything. Just take the pressure off. We'll just do some basic progressions that we can just kind of set forth and everybody's comfortable with, and just kind of lay it out and go jam. It'll be like a dead ahead jam session. So it's going to be a good time for sure.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to do it, guys. We did a good show today, I think. Quite an interesting topic. Everyone seemed to dig it. So there's our second music show, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more. Let me get this back up again. All right. That's going to do it. Everybody have a great night, and we'll see you soon.
To see. universe will speak, manifest beside me, my angel, for all to see. Will speak, manifest beside me, my angel, for all to see, manifest beside me, my angel. The universe will speak, manifest beside me, my angel, for all to see.